Good evening. Officials confirmed that U.S. crude oil has surpassed $100 per barrel for the first time since the early days of the conflict. Iranian-backed forces in Yemen have launched a ballistic missile toward Israeli territory. Within the past several hours, sources familiar with the situation confirm the development officials are calling a dangerous escalation in Washington, according to congressional sources. Thousands of Transportation Security Administration workers are relying on food banks and personal loans to pay their bills as the partial government shutdown enters its second month with no resolution in sight. Law enforcement officials in the state of Florida confirmed that golfer Tiger Woods was arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence following a vehicle rollover and has since been released on bail. And at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, 4 astronauts are preparing for what may be the most consequential launch in more than 50 years. This is a Global News special report. I am your anchor. Let us go deeper on each story. Here's where the world stands tonight. According to officials and sources across multiple governments, the United States military operation in Iran has now entered its second month with no formal end date announced. Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed this week that U.S. forces expect to conclude major operations within weeks, but analysts caution that no ceasefire framework has been agreed upon. In Asia, Nepal's former prime minister has been arrested in connection with the deaths of more than 70 protesters during last year's uprising. In Europe, a sanctioned oil tanker entered British waters just one day after the United Kingdom. Government threatened to authorize its navy to board such vessels, and at the United Nations, African and Caribbean nations are pressing forward with a landmark vote on slavery reparations. A world in motion under pressure from every direction. Let us break the United States launched military strikes against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Officials confirmed at the time that the operation was designed to neutralize Iran's nuclear and missile development programs. Tonight, 30 days later, the picture is significantly more complex than the initial military objectives suggested. According to analysts and market officials, U.S. crude oil has hit $100 per barrel, a benchmark last crossed during the early months of previous geopolitical crises. The Islamic Republic has closed the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical maritime choke points in the global energy supply chain. Officials familiar with the situation confirm that Iran has threatened to charge fees to vessels attempting to transit the strait, a move economists are describing as an act of economic hostage-taking. Stock markets fell sharply this week. According to market data, the S&P 500 index recorded significant losses as investors process the compounding impact of the Iran conflict, domestic political gridlock, and the disruption of global shipping. The White House attempted to reassure markets, but sources indicate those statements failed to halt the sell-off. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told reporters he expects the United States to finish its military operations in Iran within the next couple of weeks. He also confirmed that U.S. allies are prepared to assist in escorting commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. However, officials within the administration acknowledged that Iran has demonstrated the capacity to operate using insurgent-style tactics, making a clean military conclusion difficult to define. The human cost inside Iran is also significant. Video analyzed by military experts shows a U.S. precision strike missile used in a strike on the southern Iranian town of Lamard. According to investigators, that strike resulted in civilian casualties, details of which remain contested between U.S. and Iranian officials. In Lebanon, sources confirm that more than 1 million people have been displaced, raising fears among analysts that Israel may be preparing to replicate what observers are calling a Gaza model of urban military engagement. According to economists, every sustained rise of $10 in the price of oil historically translates to significant slowdowns in consumer spending and manufacturing output across the developed world. Direct military operations in Iran were not sufficient to rattle global stability. Officials confirmed that Yemen-based Houthi forces, backed by Iran, launched a ballistic missile toward Israeli territory. Within the past several hours, this marks the first such launch since the current conflict began and represents, according to defense analysts, a significant and dangerous escalation of the regional confrontation. Sources familiar with the Israeli defense establishment indicate that the missile was intercepted. However, officials are warning that the willingness of Houthi forces to target Israel directly signals a coordinated effort by Iranian-aligned proxy forces to widen the zone of conflict beyond what U.S. military planners had anticipated. According to analysts, Iran has long maintained what strategists call a forward defense doctrine, relying on proxy forces in Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, and Syria to project military pressure without committing its own conventional forces directly. Officials say this doctrine is now being deployed at scale in response to U.S. strikes inside Iranian territory. Secretary Rubio acknowledged this week that allied nations are in discussions about how to manage the security situation around the Strait of Hormuz, a passage through which approximately 20% of the world's operated oil flows, according to maritime officials. Watches military operations unfold thousands of miles away. According to congressional sources, the United States government remains in a state of partial shutdown, entering its second month without a resolution. The human consequences of that political standoff are now fully visible. Transportation Security Administration officers, the approximately 62,000 federal workers responsible for screening passengers at airports across the United States, have not received paychecks in more than 30 days, according to agency officials and union representatives. TSA workers interviewed by news organizations confirmed they are relying on food banks, family, loans, and personal credit to cover basic living expenses. According to officials in Congress, the House of Representatives passed a bill to fully fund the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees the TSA. However, Senate Democrats declared the measure dead on arrival, citing what they described as unacceptable provisions. With no compromise framework in place, officials acknowledge there is no clear timeline for when workers will receive back amounts. Pay sources at multiple airports indicate that TSA staffing shortages have altered security screening wait times. Officials urge travelers to check current guidance from their departure airports before making plans. A story that shook the sports and entertainment world tonight. Law enforcement officials in the state of Florida confirm that golfer Tiger Woods was arrested in the early morning hours. After his vehicle was involved in a rollover crash, officials charged Woods with driving under the influence. He was subsequently released on bail, according to law enforcement sources. Woods refused to submit to a urine test at the scene, a development that officials note creates its own legal complications under Florida state law. This is not the first time the golfer has faced legal and personal crisis. According to public records, Woods has had prior incidents involving prescription medication and driving, including a documented arrest in 2017. He also survived a serious vehicle crash in 2021 that left him with significant injuries to his right leg. Sources familiar with the situation note that Woods had recently been participating in limited golf events and had been described by those close to him as making physical progress. Tonight's developments represent a significant personal and reputational setback for one of the most recognized athletes in the history of professional sport. What may be the most consequential development in human space exploration since 1972, officials at NASA confirmed this week that the four-person crew of the Artemis II mission has arrived at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida ahead of what will be the first crewed lunar mission in more than 53 years. According to agency officials, the crew will fly aboard the Orion spacecraft, launched atop the Space Launch System rocket, on a trajectory that will take them around the moon and return them safely to Earth. This mission does not include a lunar surface landing, but officials confirm that Artemis II represents the critical precursor to a crewed lunar landing expected in subsequent missions. The mission comes after decades of stops, restarts, budget overruns, and political complications, according to investigators who have reviewed the program's history. NASA's administrator has defended the program publicly, arguing that the geopolitical imperative of returning to the moon, particularly as China advances its own lunar ambitions, makes the mission essential. In a separate but related development, an active NASA astronaut revealed this week that he experienced a mysterious speech-related medical emergency while aboard the International Space Station. a condition that doctors have not yet fully explained according to officials familiar with his case. He recovered, and officials confirm he is expected to remain in the astronaut program. Step back for a moment and consider what today's news tells us about the world we inhabit. A military conflict that began with targeted strikes has evolved into an economic siege. Proxy forces are expanding a regional war, a democracy cannot fund its own government, an icon has fallen, and 4 humans are about to fly around the moon for the first time in half a century. This is not a world without direction. It is a world pulling in every direction simultaneously. The question, according to analysts across political and academic institutions, is whether the institutions of governance, diplomacy, and international law remain strong enough to find a center that can hold. That is the complete picture of tonight's world. Thank you for watching this Global News special report. If this coverage informed you, please share it with someone who needs to understand what is happening right now. Subscribe to this channel for daily global news analysis and leave a comment below telling us which story tonight you believe will have the most lasting impact. We read every comment. The world is moving fast. Stay informed. We will be here.